Hello, good day. I'm Andri, and I do welcome you to my essential philosophical reading series. Today, I shall present one of the most important and yet the most controversial philosophers of all time, and that was Friedrich Nietzsche. But who was Friedrich Nietzsche actually? A wild man, the self-proclaimed antichrist of Western thought? He was a brilliant polemicist, we all know. He championed energy and power over reason and art over science. Nietzsche, an inveterate foe of Christianity and of Platonic philosophy, is absolutely central to modern and postmodern attempts to rethink the Western tradition's most fundamental assumptions. Nietzsche was born in a small village in Prussian Saxony. He was the son and grandson on both sides of the family of Lutheran ministers. His father died when he was only 4, and his younger brother died the next year, leaving little Friedrich the only male in a household with 5 women. Nietzsche's subsequent infatuations with the work of German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer and with the work, theories, and wife of German composer Richard Wagner, followed by his equally violent rejections of these 2 men, the process, which sometimes is explained in terms of surrogate father figure and Oedipal rebellion. Certainly, Wagner and his wife Cosima dominated Nietzsche's life in the early 1870s. Having received his doctorate at the University of Leipzig, Nietzsche was appointed professor of philology at the University of Basel in Switzerland in 1869. There he met Wagner and Cosima in late 1868, and his first book, which we shall present it here later on, The Birth of Tragedy, published in 1872, combines a new theory of Greek tragedy with an extended argument that Wagner's work constitutes a German rebirth of that ancient form. By 1876, however, our Nietzsche had broken completely with Wagner, repelled by Wagner's turn to Christianity and his increasing anti-Semitism. That same year, ill health forced Nietzsche to stop teaching. In 1879, he officially resigned his university role, receiving a small disability pension. He spent the next 10 years writing the books that present his very ambitious attempt to overthrow Christianity and post-Socratic philosophy through a radical re-evaluation of all values. The last 10 years of Nietzsche's life were lost to incoherent madness. After a mental breakdown that happened in 1889, he returned to his birthplace to live with his mother. But when she died in 1897, he came under the care of his sister Elizabeth, which continued until his death. Even before Nietzsche's death, his sister wrote a biography to publicize her brother's work, and she published her own editions of Nietzsche's writings. Elizabeth stressed those elements that accorded with her own anti-Semitic and pro-Aryan views, and is often blamed for the Nazis' later appropriation of Nietzsche as a philosopher sympathetic to the Nazi policies. But blaming his sister does not absolve Nietzsche, not at all. Some aspects of his thought chime with National Socialism, while other contradicts it. Now, those who read and interpret Nietzsche's challenging work must grapple with his relation to the Nazis, just as they must take into account his tremendous and very important influence on modernism, existentialism, and post-structuralism. Our selection here will be taken from his book, The Birth of Tragedy, published in 1872, that shows how Nietzsche returns to Greek thought before Plato to discover the artistic form and worldview that he prefers to the Platonic and Christian traditions. Nietzsche's mantra in this text is that only as an aesthetic phenomenon do existence and the world appear justified. This formula draws on the root meaning of aesthetic as pertaining to sense perception. Nietzsche says that life is worthwhile only if we experience strong feelings or very powerful sensations. Nietzsche thus appears to promote a kind of heroic individualism and transcendent genius. He has often been read this way, not least by countless modernist artists who also responded to his diatribes against the conformist herds that tried to curb the strong, amoral artist. Much in Nietzsche celebrates the will of the overman, der Übermensch, and denigrates everything from conventional morality to democracy that would make the genius answerable to any authority outside of his self. His is used advisedly. Nietzsche often contrasts this individual's manly strength to the effeminate weakness of lesser souls. But to read Nietzsche as a philosopher of heroic individualism is to miss much. Our text shows that human suffering figures largely in Nietzsche's thought. The individual is subjected to a world that precedes and is more powerful than the self. Greek tragedy, in Nietzsche's view, grants us a glimpse of a primordial unity that predates individuation, which Nietzsche associates with comedy. He takes seriously the very claim that Greek tragedy originated in choral songs performed at a festival of Dionysus and that Aeschylus introduced the first individualized characters. Such individuation, Nietzsche argues in The Birth of Tragedy, is necessary for artistic expression and it is necessary for the artistic form. The chaos of Dionysian non-differentiation can be rendered intelligible or expressible only by the calm Apollonian semblance conveyed by words and images. But the glory of Greek tragedy is that it does not take Apollonian semblance for truth, or at least not for the entire truth. Prometheus becomes Nietzsche's primary example of the need to establish an existence apart from the primordial unity. But Prometheus must suffer for the fact of his individuation. And Nietzsche insists that it is the sufferings of Dionysus himself whose repeated deaths and rebirths enact this end of individuation that are represented in every tragedy. The primal contradiction hidden within the things of the world is that while humans can experience energy, can experience will and sensation only as individuals, the process of individuation separates them from the universe. Thus, suffering is inevitable, says Nietzsche. The essence of the tragic view is to affirm that suffering, to glory in the active wrongdoing by which the hero offends the way things are, and to say, as Nietzsche imagines Aeschylus saying, all that exists is just and unjust and is equally justified in both respects. So far, tragedy can exist only so long as we recognize, as we accept, and as we affirm the solvable contradiction between our hopes and how world is. Once we believe that suffering is not inevitable, tragedy dies. We begin to demand justice from our gods, and life is justified not as an aesthetic phenomenon, but rather because justice is finally done. In the comic ending, the good are rewarded, the bad punished, and human desires and worldly facts are aligned. In The Birth of Tragedy, Nietzsche blames Euripides and Socrates for the death of the tragic worldview in ancient Athenian society. Euripides effects a reconciliation with the gods in many of his plays, thus assuring the audience that all can be made right in this world. Socrates and then Plato suggest that reason can lead humans to ascertain the truth of the universe to which they can conform.